All right.
Now we
So,
can start.
all right. So, I have to start by thanking Faye. Faye's gonna. Why is he thanking me for it? The reason I have to thank Faye is because Faye is the one that always reminds me who I'm supposed to thank. You know, behind every mitzvah, there's a person that steers you in the right direction to do a mitzvah. You know what I mean? You have to, a mitzvah, goreret mitzvah. One mitzvah leads somebody to another mitzvah. So when someone does something nice and they make a donation, I always say, you know, you've led me to do a mitzvah. I want to do something now too in return. And the mitzvah is to thank Faye, because Faye behind the scenes puts up with a lot of shtick, meaning she'll send something out and I'll say, can you compile it with the other list so I don't forget to do this or do that? And she thinks I'm a pain. I was going to use the word, but I'm going to not use that word because I'm on record.
Yeah.
A pain in the rear end. But I do it because I don't want to be that person that forgets. So thank you to Faye for always keeping me on track. Today's class is sponsored in appreciation of Marshall Loomer. I thought that was very kind, by the Blankenstein, Ways Glass, and Goodman families. So I thought that was, they recently lost their mother, Frida Blankenstein. And Frida was a very, she was a lovely lady, and she liked to do things for the community. You know, her home was always open to other people. So I know that about her. And you know, she'll be missed in the community along with her husband, Abi, who she is joined with in the Olam Haba. So may her name serve as a blessing. So thank you to the Blankenstein and Ways Glass and Goodman families for supporting today's class. So last week, we were talking about how there's a machloket. There's always a machloket. In Yiddish, they say, "Oh, there's a machlokes, a machlokes." So, what is a machlokes in the shul, for instance, when there's a split between the membership? Half the membership want to do something, and the other half don't want to do something. So, yesterday, I'm always getting emailed questions, not necessarily by people that even attend our class, but my machatenista, Risa, asked me a very interesting question. She said, my husband came home from shul and he told me that what I'm doing for the Lechem Mishnah, the second challah, you're supposed to have two challahs together on Shabbos, or two bilkas or something, right? Why? Because you know that on Shabbos you weren't allowed to pick mana. You weren't allowed to pick man. So you pick in advance. So two chalot. Some people say it represents the Shnei Luchot Habrit. You know, there's different interpretations. But the question was, he learned from a rabbi who went to do a lecture there, that his wife was taking a frozen challah out of the freezer. So Risa was taking a frozen bilka, putting it beside the good fresh one, saying the hamotzi, taking the frozen bilka and putting it back in the freezer. You got two bilkas. And she said, my husband says you're not allowed to do that. The rabbi said you can't do that. I said, did you ever stop to think that whenever one rabbi says something, maybe there's another opinion? Let me find out. I said, because I know somewhere I heard something about this. It isn't in the realm of when I studied kashrut, but it's in the realm of mashgiach kashrut, for instance. Do you know that when you have a mashgiach in a situation, they are the supervisor, they are in charge of everything, they're overseeing, they're the boss, they can shut down your shul if they want to. They can decide what is allowed and what is not allowed. And they are supposed to not be paid by the synagogues or by the institution, but they have to be paid by an organization which collects the money, which pays them, so that they're not so-called indebted to the people that are running the bit. You know what I mean? You can't be on the take. You know what I mean? Like, oh, I'll pass this. So what? They're putting in a few grasshoppers or worms into the food. Well, look the other way. No big deal. And the bugs don't matter because I'm getting paid enough. It can't be that way. It's got to be that they're getting paid from an so that they have no relationship with the ownership at all. So I said, you cannot shop around for opinions. If you ask your rabbi what the answer is for a question, and he gives you the answer, you've asked that rabbi, that's the answer. You can't now say, I'm going to go and ask another rabbi because I don't like the answer he gave me. This rabbi said this. Let me get the answer I want. I'm going to keep on shopping. So when I ask a rabbi a question, one of the rabbis that I go to, sometimes he'll say to me, better you shouldn't ask the question because you're not going to like the answer I'm going to give you. And then I have to decide on the spot, do I want the answer or not? So sometimes I say, okay, thank you for not giving me the answer, and you hang up. Or sometimes you say, no, I want to hear the answer. But once he gives you the answer, that's what you should follow. But I always say in every class, a rabbi's full-time job is to argue with each other. That's what they do. A machloket. And we have a machloket between what we said last week, between Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach. We talked about Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach. He lived in a neighborhood. He passed away, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago. When did he pass away? He passed away in 1995. It's more than 10 years ago. But he was a posek and a Rosh Yeshiva in Ramat Shlomo, and Ramat Shlomo was named after him, Shlomo Zalman. And there's a machloket between him and the Chazon Ish, who is Rav Avraham Yeshayahu Karelitz, another Haredi rabbi who spent his last 20 years in Israel before he passed away in 1953. But when I say 1953 or 1995, we're not talking about the 10th century or the 12th century from Rambam. If I tell you this happened in the 12th century, you might say to me, so long ago. But when I say this happened in the 1950s or this happened in 1995, that's not so long ago. And the machloket, you know, it starts off where we talked about what was the difference between one concept and another. What was considered building, bona? They were saying electricity. You turn on a switch, it's bona. It's connected to the grounds, it's connected to the wires downtown. It's in a sense building. And this example, which I don't think I brought up last week, if I did, tell me so I'll stop talking. You have four men. This relates to the person last week who said, what about using an umbrella on Shabbat? Somebody said, can't you? Was it Adele? I don't remember. Adele said, can you use it? Noreen?
It was Esther.
Esther. So, Esther, you're 100% right. It's a very good question because maybe we should be allowed to use an umbrella. Listen to this. Four men are holding up a talit on Simchat Torah. You got the poles. It's a yontif, isn't it? Why are they holding it up? Because we got a Chatan Breshit or a Chatan Torah. We give it an honor to somebody. You know, you get the honor of Chatan Torah, Chatan Breshit, and we're holding it up. Or if you go to some shuls, and I think it's a beautiful tradition, I would love to start this tradition in our shul. Maybe we'll, someday we'll do this. I've seen it at the Narayever, and I think it's beautiful, where they hold the talit over the bar mitzvah. They do, I think they did over the bar mitzvah or the bat mitzvah. And they do it also at Heschel, at the Hebrew school. But when one of the children are about to have a b'nai mitzvah, they take a talit and they do a yevarechecha with the talit over the child. I think it's a beautiful thing, you know. But anyway, you're holding up these poles and you're holding up this talit. What is that? Is that now did you build something because you're holding up four poles? They're all contributing. Everybody's holding up a pole to a talit. And they say, well, it's temporary. If they let go of the poles, it would fall down. Do you remember the handle that the whitewasher would put together? You see, you're all nodding your head. See how much you've learned already? You know so much. And he'd assemble it, or he had to get low down to the ground. He disassembled it. Was that really considered building, like some of the rabbis said? Because it's temporary. It's not permanent. It's not like gluing two pieces of wood together. It's not like tikkun mana, where you're taking a nail and a hammer and striking the hammer so the nail goes through the two pieces of wood. You're not cementing the bricks together. That already is permanent. So I'm leading, you know where I'm going with this. Like when you turn the switch on and you turn the switch off, is it temporary or is it permanent? And when they're holding the talit over and you let go, the talit would fall down. Think about this for a minute. A force of some kind has to come from outside to hold something up. So Bona has to be able to stand all by itself. if you build a house and you cement the bricks together, it stands all by itself. I don't have to stand there and hold the wall up with my hands. If you did, it wouldn't be much of a house. It would be my shacky, I call it a cottage. It's not even a cottage. My cabins that I have up in northern Ontario in the bush. I have this cabin. Sometimes you feel like you want to walk over and hold the wall because you're afraid that it's just going to. Anyway, the radio is very, very similar. A radio can only function as long as the electricity is passing through the radio. It's got all these tubes and all these wires and all these switches. While the electricity is going through the circuitry, the radio functions. As soon as the electricity is not passing through it, there's no supply of electricity. It's not a radio anymore. It's nothing. It's a box. You know, Bernie, you can relate to this. A mortar and pestle, you know, grinding is grinding. You're laughing. You know, you're not allowed to grind on Shabbat, right? I mean, you can grind on Shabbat. Probably you could get away with it if it was for pekuach nefesh, you know. You're allowed to medicine for somebody. But grinding just for the purpose of grinding, you're not supposed to do that. That's why a pepper mill, you're not supposed to turn a pepper mill to grind. We have shakers that we use for Shabbat. That you can do. So if you have I hand you a mortar and pestle, is it really muktzah? Is it really something? It's if you're not using is it the mortar? When you say mortar and pestle, is the mortar the stick that goes in, or is it the other way around? Or the
other way around.
It's the other way around. See, I'm the son of a pharmacist, and I still don't even know. But you should know that together they're useless unless somebody's holding it and doing something. There has to be an action. So I wouldn't call it, you know, grinding unless you're actually using it to grind. The radio is a box. If I were to snip off the electrical wire that you plug in, is it a radio anymore? It's a box with no cord. You can't even plug it in.
It's a broken radio.
Pardon?
It's a broken radio.
It's a broken radio. That's right. So in order for a person, for one of us here, to be guilty, because isn't that what we're talking about? Why do we care about any of this? I mean, you keep coming back, and I say, and so I have to talk about something, and I'm saying, because we're Jews, we're guilty all the time. We wake up in the morning and we say, I'm sorry for what I'm going to do. I'm sorry, Hashem. I'm sorry for, I'm going to, for sure, I'm going to break a rule. I'm going to break a law. You know, if we're feeling guilty about turning on a radio on Shabbat, there should be bigger problems in the world, is what I'm saying, that we have to worry about right now. I'm thinking of all the problems in the world that we have to think about. But yet we don't want to on purpose, do things that are going to be violating Shabbat. You know, we talked about community. So where did I start with all this? The frozen bilka. You take out the frozen bread. See, Faye, you thought I got lost, right? You take the frozen bread out, you put it beside the good challah, and you put it back into the freezer. Why can't you do that? My machbachut said, the rabbi said you can't do that because it's a frozen state. Do you eat frozen challah fresh out of the freezer, frozen? You got to be pretty hungry. That's not kedarko. It's lo kedarko. It's not what you would normally do. What do you normally do? You normally take challah out of the freezer if it's in the freezer, or you buy it fresh, and you let it defrost. And after it defrosts, you eat it. Normally, you have a timer on your lights, let's say, and the lights go on and the lights go off. So the rabbi said that's kedarko. That's normal for people to do that. Well, they decided it's normal because nobody would stop doing it. The community was already doing it. They said if we take it away, they're going to still do it. I believe, and I could be wrong, that in a number of years, that will be the position for many electrical and electronic appliances, even in the modern Orthodox world. I can't go as far as to say in the Orthodox world, because they're going to be the last holdouts, but it's coming. They'll all find leniencies. And why do I say it? Because once everybody's turning on, having their radio come on and off on a timer, and it becomes normal, it becomes kedarko, it's no longer, if I say to you, you can't put your radio on Shabbat, that's not Shabbos Dick. You're going to say, yeah, but Marshall Loomer has his radio going on a timer, and Bernie Shimmer has his radio going on a timer, and everybody in my community has the radio going on. The rabbi at my shul has his radio going on a timer and going off. When you walk into the rabbi's house and the radio comes on a timer, you're not going to think, oh, he turned the radio on in Shabbat. You're going to go, the rabbi had a timer turned it on, a timer turned it off. The same way as lights. So there is a whole thing. The bread that's frozen is not kedarko. You don't eat a frozen bilka. If you take the bilka out of the freezer, according to Rav Avadia Yosef, and he says that you can, Rav Avadia Yosef, by the way, was a great Sephardic scholar in Eretz Yisrael. He's a heavyweight. I call him a heavyweight, not because he was a heavy guy, but because he's a posek that people really respect. And he said, if you take it out, even though it's frozen and you're not going to eat it, you're only going to eat the one that's not frozen, and you leave it out to defrost so that it's possible that you may come to eat it on Shabbat, that's allowed. Ein bishul achar bishul. You're not defrosting raw meat. That's not allowed. You're not supposed to take out raw meat on Shabbat from the freezer. You don't take a frozen steak out of the freezer and leave it out to defrost so that you can have it Motzei Shabbos, after Shabbat. You don't do that. Because it's raw. You can't, if it defrosts in 10 minutes, you're not going to take the raw steak and eat it. But if it's already cooked, you can take it out. You have a cooked steak, cooked, and you take it out of the freezer and you put it in the fridge so it'll start defrosting for after Shabbat. Even that's allowed, even if your intention is to eat it after Shabbat, because your purpose of taking it out, it's already cooked. Ein bishul, which means there is no cooking after cooking. If something's cooked, it's already cooked. The bread is already cooked. It's baked. We call it baked, but baked is cooked. It's not raw. Therefore, if you leave it out, according to Rav Avadia Yosef, you can have it. According to Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, you can't do it at all. So you see, here are two opposing opinions by two great rabbis who disagree on the issue with the frozen challah. Who cares about frozen challah? Why am I talking about it? I'm showing you an example of how you may choose to do things according to this rabbi, and someone else may choose to do this according to that rabbi. Both of those rabbanim are correct. There is no opinion of one of them that is greater than the other. That happens sometimes in Jewish law. And what happens is it becomes for you to decide, are you following the Ashkenazi practice or are you following a Sephardic practice? Are you following the practice of choice out of convenience? Are you saying, I like for this rabbi's opinion, and for that, I like that rabbi's opinion? Because that's picking and choosing. That's not kedarko. That's not doing what your community really wants you to do. In our community, right here on Zoom, our community says it's okay, I've said this 1,000 times, to take a glass, fill it with water, boil it in your microwave before Pesach. The steam goes up, your microwave is kashered. I know modern Orthodox people that do it. I know my teacher in Israel doesn't do it. He says you can't do it. But he didn't say to me, if I don't do it, you can't do it. Because I asked him the question. And he's so good. Why? Because here's what he said. I think you should do what your rabbi and your community does. And he used the word community. And I love that. And this is a Haredi rabbi. This guy lives in the holy neighborhood in Ramat Shlomo. He lives in Rav Shlomo Zalman's Auerbach's neighborhood. That neighborhood, he said, they don't do it. In our neighborhood, we do it. So why can't I do it? Now I struggle because I go, not that I'm such a frumkite, but I struggle because I go, should I be following what my teacher doesn't, like he doesn't do it? Should I do it? And this happens now with all of the yeshivas in Israel. You send your students, your sons, you send them to school. They go and they learn, and they're told, this hashgacha is no good. That hashgacha is no good. That hashgacha is only good. And all these different rules. The issue of donuts became a big thing in Israel for Hanukkah. Can a non-Jew fry the donuts? Can you eat it if a non-Jew fries the donut in the donut bakery? And it was himself, Rav Avadia Yosef, who had the whole deal with the whole issue. And he didn't know what to do because most of Israel are secular. Most of Israel don't care. And for those that do care, they only care that much. So he was kind and he said, it's okay to eat the donuts from the donut places, because they're very fancy in Israel, I understand, for Hanukkah, even if they're fried by a non-Jew. But for my community, I think we should eat from the, you know what I mean? So in other words, he's Sephardic. He's saying, I think we should be a little more strict about that. So rabbis often do that. So what was the machloket? Electricity. There was a machloket between the Chazon Ish and Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach. And what we know already are the rules. I don't have to teach you the rules because you can look the rules up in any book. You can type in Rabbi Google and ask the internet what the answer is, and you get the answers. You know you can't go and flip a switch on and off on Shabbat. You already know that. That's not why you came here. You came here either because you like to listen to me ramble on, it's entertaining, or you came here because you figure that maybe you'll understand the sources more of how we came to these decisions, because the more you explore the sources. So Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, he wrote the Minchat Shlomo, right? We talked about the Minchat Shlomo. He said, even if pressing a button, a man goes and presses the button to, I don't know, the radio, the TV, the switch, you have a push button thing to your lights. He's not turning on the light, he said. He's causing an action, a movement, or he's turning something without there being done through it any malacha, any violation. Because we know we have 39 malachot, 39 violations: grinding, sewing, sorting, farming, yoking two animals together. There's all these different things that are categorized as the main violations. And then you have a minor rabbinic violation that if you do something not intentionally, it may not be as serious. It doesn't need any setting up, he said. In any case, he said, we can see clearly from the words of the Chazon Ish that he's concerned that there is a violation of boneh, of building. If someone turns on a flashlight, now flashlights, how is that? It's batteries. Batteries aren't permanent. Batteries run out of steam. They run out of their charge. They're only temporarily. It's done through a direct current from the battery. It's DC. Once the current runs out, it's dead. Unless it's rechargeable, and then you can recharge it, but it's finished, it's done. We're not suggesting you go, the flashlight runs out, and then you go and you recharge the batteries on Shabbat, because that would be turning on the electricity, etc. But even a flashlight, he said, that's AC. When you use electrical current for radio or for lights, when you flip on the light switch. This comes from a battery DC current. He said, we don't need at all for the wire, for the flow to turn on even a magnet. He said, the thing requires more looking into. Well, that's an honest opinion from a great rabbi. He's saying, you know what? I don't have all the answers yet. I need to look into it more. I need to discover more. I need to learn what a flashlight does and how it works. So he wanted to know. He was a person that liked to know, because he said a battery is like a tank of gas or a Bunsen burner. It's got oil in the bottom that burns, and then it goes out and it runs out, it's gone. A tank of gas runs out. Once it runs out, it's done, it's finished. The battery is a tank of gas. The battery has power. You turn on the flashlight, it sucks the power, it drains. Why can't you use a battery? So the Minchat Shlomo, one of the things that he said, this is verbatim, I'm going to just quote this to you. He says, how do these rabbis always start? David, how do they, you know how they start? He just said it. In my humble opinion, that's what he said, in my humble opinion, the prohibition to turn on the current on Shabbat is only because of the result. The prohibition of turning on electricity is only because of what's going to happen because I turn it on. It's not turning on the switch. It's because if I turn on the switch, something's going to happen. The Sunbeam Mixmaster is going to come on if I turn on the switch. So that which is done through the electricity, whether it's cooking, whether it's illuminating, etc., any of those things, you are causing a malacha. You are causing a violation. I didn't say you're doing a violation. I said you're causing a violation to happen. You're setting something. You know what? Do you remember before I talked about the dishwashers? And I said, you got a timer on the dishwasher. You have a thing, it says it's coming on for an hour before. So before Shabbat, I set the timer so it'll come on in 2 hours. And then I eat dinner. And I put the dishes into the dishwasher. And I close the dishwasher door. And the dishwasher comes on 2 hours later and washes my dishes. I'm not washing the dishes. The timer came on just like the timer turns the lights on. But the problem is, when I closed that door, a magnetic switch told the timer, start going now, start going. And the timer starts counting down 2 hours because I closed the door. It's the causation. I caused an action to happen. Closing the door is not a violation. Closing the door and causing an action to start 2 hours later on Shabbat is a violation. That's the violation. He said, Al Yadayim, he uses those words, Al Yadayim, on your own hands. You have a question, Noreen?
Can you not close the door?
Your dishwasher would come on and the water would go all over your floor.
Okay, I don't have
that. What they do in Israel is they have a Jewish serviceman who understands dishwashers, and he disengages the magnetic switch. So when you turn on your Shabbat, you turn on your dishwasher, the timer before Shabbat, whether or not you close your door or not, it's going to come on. That is allowed. It's shtick, but it's allowed. So now you close your door, the magnetic switch is disengaged. What would happen if you said, you know what, Harvey, there's only 2 dishes here to wash. I'm not going to use the dishwasher tonight. Forget about it. I'm going to just wash them by hand with cold water because I don't want to cause the hot water tank to come on in Shabbat. And I'm going to use a little soap and I'm going to wash them and I'm going to put them in the drain board and shoin. And you go to bed and you fall asleep. And 2 hours later, you got a flood because you forgot to close the door to your dishwasher. So you got to put up a big paper before Shabbat on your fridge door that says, don't forget to close the dishwasher door, right? But that's what people do. So the problem is, are you directly causing, because we talked a lot about b'diavad. We first talked about this early on in my first kashrut class. We said, you cook the dairy food in the meat pot that hasn't been used in 24 hours. Is the food treif? No, the food's allowed, but you got to kosher the pot again later. Why is the food allowed? Because it wasn't done intentionally and the pot wasn't used for 24 hours. When something is done b'diavad, I mean, on the way, it's already being done and it's not being lechatchila on purpose, then you can go ahead and you can do it. You don't do it intentionally. I think tonight I'm going to make a cheese pasta in my fleshik pot. You don't, well, first of all, none of us think like that. You know what I mean? But, I'll give you an example. My machatenis Derisa always brings up these interesting points to me. Who here owns a air fryer? So I bought an air fryer because people told me they were fantastic, and I started to use it. I love this thing. It's fantastic. And I made it fleischiks. You can cook steak in it, chicken in it. It's like frying with almost no oil. You can, anything you want. It's unbelievable. When I bought it, it was $150. Today, it's at Costco for $69. Today, $69. So I should have waited. But anyway, here's the thing. It's a fry basket. You can't kosher it for Pesach. It's too difficult. So you don't use it for Pesach. I don't want to buy another one just to use for Pesach for $69 because who needs an appliance like another appliance to plug up my house with more junk for 1 week a year? But she asked this question. If she makes fish in it, because it's fleshik, she makes meat in it. If she cooks salmon in it, is the salmon meat? No, think about it. Is salmon meat? No, salmon's salmon, it's fish. I cooked it in a meat utensil. If you do it intentionally, it's called tam flesh. It has the sensation of being meat because you cannot clean that thing perfectly. You can clean it almost perfectly, but there's still going to be some residue. So the answer is you can eat it on a meat plate. You take the salmon and you have it on a meat plate or a glass plate. But you don't eat it at the same time as having sour cream. You're not meat. You don't have to wait 6 hours after eating it. Isn't that interesting? You cook the salmon in a meat utensil. You don't have to wait 6 hours or 3 hours if that's your custom or whatever your custom is. But you can't eat it now on purpose on a dairy plate. But diavad, if you forgot and you put it on a dairy plate, it wouldn't trafe up your plate. It's salmon, but you don't do it intentionally. You would eat the salmon on a meat plate, but you wouldn't smother it with Parmesan because it has the sensation of meat. You'll eat it with vegetables and you have it. You're not fleshiks. You didn't eat fleshiks. You didn't eat meat. The action that you did, it didn't cause you. There's no violation here. So the battery that's running out in the flashlight, are you going to refill it? The flashlight runs out. I turn I got no light. I forgot. I have a power failure. It's Shabbat. It's 7 o'clock at night. The city power went off. I have no lights in the house and I want to read on Shabbat. So I got a flashlight. Can I use the flashlight? Because the flashlight is temporary power. It's going to draw down. It's going to run out. Think of the Shabbat candle. The Shabbat candle, you light it. You don't blow it out. It slowly burns down and then it goes out all by itself and it extinguishes all by itself. The flashlight is essentially doing exactly the same thing, but we're not lighting the Shabbat candles on Shabbat. We're lighting them before Shabbat. I'm talking about turning the actual flashlight on Shabbat. So the Minchat Shlomo says, everything that you do regarding a flashlight like that, it's a different case. If all of the result from turning on the current is that the battery runs down or the gas in the can vaporizes and evaporates and cools down, then I don't know what the prohibition should be. I don't know, is there even such a thing? He says it's impossible to make up all by ourselves a halachic rule saying the following. We don't have the right to make up this rule And in any case, a Torah prohibition would be midoraisa, a violation, and it's not. So turning on a flashlight, he says, which has a source like that, which is going to run down from a battery, he said it's no different than turning on the tap of water. You're causing the water to flow, you turn off the tap of water. The water's already there in the pipes. The battery power is there. You turned it on, but the battery's going to run down and finish and showing. He said there's no Torah violation. He didn't say there's no rabbinic violation. A tolada. We called it a tolada, secondary violation. Well, he continues. He says, regarding, for instance, a microphone, a telephone, an amplifier on Shabbat. He says, it seems, in my humble opinion, that the person has not done any lighting or any extinguishing. If he connects the telephone with the current, because he picks it up and wants to talk, one shouldn't prohibit this on Shabbat and Yom Tov. It's not a violation of finishing something off. There's no tikkun mana. There is no final blow from the hammer. There's no bona. There's no building in picking up a telephone today and making a phone call. This is Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach saying this. This is one of our great rabbis. But do we follow that? No, we know we don't. But let's say for a minute you didn't know anything. You don't know anything. We all are starting from scratch. Here is a great rabbi that is saying it's not the final blow of a hammer. It's not like connecting bricks and cementing them by picking up a telephone and using a telephone or talking into a microphone. This is from Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach. It's fascinating. But he says, I think, and this is in bold letters, okay, if you can imagine me blowing this up, the masses, the people cannot distinguish this. What is he saying? He's saying, I don't trust the people to make a distinction between what is considered building and what is not considered building, because you're all a bunch of stupid people. That's what he's really saying. Not you, me, and everybody else. He's saying, you'll make the wrong decisions. If we allow you to do that, then you'll think it's okay to say, hey, Siri, make my lawnmower cut the grass. You won't be able to tell the difference. I mean, we're going to get to that world someday, you know what I mean? Where everything is going to be, I don't have that technology in my house. I'm sure somebody here does, but you know, you say, hey, Google, make my refrigerator be 4 degrees instead of 5 degrees. Hey, Google, make me macaroni and cheese. You know, like you're not making the macaroni and cheese, you're not cooking, but your words could have a causation to cause an effect, to do something, even words. But when Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach says this, but I think that the masses, the people cannot distinguish between this. This is how we are controlled as Jews by the rabbis. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm saying it's a good thing because we don't know enough. Think about olive oil on, forget about Pesach. In general, 10 years ago, Kor said, olive oil doesn't need a hechsher. If it's pure olive oil, you can have any olive oil you want. Now, they're saying you can't do that because you read a bottle of olive oil, it says 100% pure olive oil. But if you read carefully on some of the bottles, it says olive oil, canola oil, this oil, that, it's a mixture on some bottles. Not on most, but on some. So you might not be smart enough to look at the ingredients. And if you're buying it and it says using 100% olive oil, that means the olive oil that they use, which is only 20%, is 100% pure olive oil, but it doesn't mean that the whole contents in the whole bottle is 100% pure olive oil. That causes a problem because the rabbis are saying, we can't trust the Jewish community of Toronto. They're going to misread it. They're going to see it says 100% pure olive oil, and they're just going to grab it and use it. And they might even come to use it on Pesach. And that's terrible because we all know that as Jews, we're supposed to kill ourselves by eating cottonseed oil on Pesach. The potato chips are made with cottonseed oil. The chazaraya is made with, do you know how bad cottonseed oil is for you? And the margarine that they make us eat on Pesach is even worse. So I figure 1 week a year won't hurt us. But it's all terrible for us. But they don't trust us. Yeah.
So can I may I interrupt? Just want to ask. Let me take you back to the blackout situation that you talked about, and the use of the flashlight. Yeah. Do the rabbis have any type of decision concerning emergency situations? Other than illness, obviously, you call the doctor and blah, blah, blah. Would they look at the use of a flashlight from an emergency perspective?
Only if safety, only if two things are the tzorech, are the need. One, it has to be life or death. So in other words, you have an old person in a building, in an apartment, and she might come, he might come, they might come to trip and fall and break a hip in the dark, chas v'shalom. That is considered a need. That's one. But simply for saying to make our Shabbat more meaningful because we want to have light so we can read or study or whatever it is. My father told me a story about how in his house, their house or apartment, whatever they lived in when I was a kid, that often they had lights would be set. They didn't have timers like we did today. So something would blow out or something wouldn't, they have a bulb would go out or whatever it is. That was it, showing you sat in the dark until Shabbat ended. It wasn't the end of the world. You might have to sit there for 3 hours, and they sat and they waited the 3 hours it went out, and then they made Havdalah and away they went, right? So the answer is, if ever there's a great need, of course there's always going to be leniencies. A great need means a life and death situation or making somebody comfortable. How about the sick, dying person who's in bed and they're in their bedroom and it's cold in the apartment because the heating went off and they're going to suffer. You don't even have enough blankets to keep. Would we want that person to suffer? Would we want that? No, of course not. We would say that to enhance their living conditions, they need to have this happen. So at worst, we'd say, big deal. You're making a rabbinic violation. We do it every day on everything we do. Every time I open my mouth and I say something bad about somebody, whether it's Lashon Hara, there's all kinds of different rabbinic violations that we do on a daily basis. I would say when there is a situation where the rabbis always say a great tzorech, a great need, there's always going to be leniencies, and that's where common sense really comes in. Yep. And certainly a flashlight would fall into that category because a flashlight is not even AC current, it's DC current, which means that when the tank runs out and the battery runs out, you might get 1 hour out of the flashlight, but it will give you 1 hour of comfort. Now, if you're saying, I'm turning on the flashlight so that I can finish my Scrabble game, maybe you'd say, is that necessary? Or I'm turning on the flashlight so that my mother doesn't trip and fall going to the bathroom down the hall, God forbid, and break a hip because it's dark and she can't see where she's going. That would be considered a different. There is common sense. And I'm just getting there.
Okay.
And you asked the question. No, don't be sorry. I'm glad you did it because it helps me come to where I'm going. because I often go off track. No, you were exactly right in asking that question at that time. So Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach continues and he says, the people can make an error of saying that something is allowed to lehadlik, he said, to light, to turn on the electricity on Shabbat. And therefore, even according to my opinion, he said, which would be lenient, he's being lenient. Even according to my opinion, these appliances should be allowed. We should be able to use these kinds of appliances like a flashlight or whatever these things are. How about it's really, really hot and you're flipping on a switch so you'll have a fan to help cool you down to make you more comfortable. He felt that these things should be allowed. One should not accept this unless there is a case of great need. So when you asked that question, David, it was coming up in almost my very next sentence. And that is exactly where we're going with it. In a case like this, there has to be a great need. And I think you gave me a great need. And we have to, do we make up the great need? Do we say, I'm using the flashlight because I want to finish my game of gin rummy? Or I'm using the flashlight because I can't see around the place. Now you got the flashlight on. I can see my way to the bathroom. I left the light on. I put it over there. It's a flashlight. It will run out all by itself. It happens to be on. If I want to play gin rummy now, I can play gin rummy. Wow, what a concept. And that's exactly where I'm going next, which is the idea of things like security monitors. How is it different from a security monitor? This is the kind of a question that deals with a light we'll use a light as an example, but it could be anything. And Bernie asks a question, can you say, hey, Google, for the weather on Shabbat? The answer is not yet. It's coming. I believe it's coming. So you walk down the street and your hat blows off. You got a nice hat on, it's Shabbat, you're walking along, it's a nice summer day, you have a straw hat on, the wind comes and blows your hat off. I'm making this up. And you run to chase your hat. And I run up and I'm just running up and I'm on Maxwell and I'm running and it blew onto Esther's front lawn. And the hat's going and here I am on my front lawn and I'm on Esther's front lawn and Esther has this motion detector, so that if some stranger's walking up to her house, it clicks on, gives a light that maybe the person will be afraid to think somebody's home. They won't want to burglarize, chas v'shalom, her home. So you run up, you get your hat, the light comes on. I caused that light to come on. I ran to get my hat. I tripped the motion sensor. I did exactly what they're telling me I'm not supposed to do. I tripped the light, which caused an action to make that light come on. But did I do it on purpose? No. What was my reason to trip the light on Esther's lawn in Maxwell? To get the hat. I want to get the hat. I don't care about her light. I care about you, Esther, but not the light. And I don't care about the security. And she has cameras on there too. And the cameras are showing me on a television screen. And now she sees that I'm on her front lawn. She's laughing. And I'm there and I'm outside. And I got, not only now I've tripped the camera, I've tripped the lights. Everything's going off. And all I want is my hat. Now imagine this. I know that Esther now, she's got a camera and she's got a light. So on purpose, I'm going to go there at night on purpose, for the purpose of going there to trip that light. I'm going to stand there all night and do this. And I'm going to talk and make faces in the camera. That's lechatchila. That's already on purpose to drive her crazy. That you can't do. First of all, you can't drive her crazy. And secondly, you're not allowed to do things intentionally to trip things off. That's already, my purpose of going there is to do it. So that comes up because Forget about the area of the Kotel where all of Yerushalayim now has cameras everywhere you walk, whether it's Shabbat, whether it's not Shabbat. I'm not posing for the camera. I'm not intentionally carrying. In fact, I wish they weren't even there. That's what the rabbis say. I wish they weren't even there. But they have to be there for security. That's not my purpose. I'm walking to get to the Kotel. I'm not walking there with the purpose of posing for cameras. This is one of our modern problems. In shul, this whole virus had a negative impact and a positive impact. What's positive? I like to focus on the positive. The negative impact is very simple. I'm standing there on Shabbat before we had a minyan. It's just me and Michael, and I'm going, "Hi everybody, hi Harvey, hi Noreen," in the camera. That's posing. I'm not allowed to do that on Shabbat. I have to be like as if the camera's not even there and ignore you at home. But I find that hard to do because I know you're there and I want to pay attention to you. Then the second issue is, on the positive side, is that I know that my wife, that Laura does all of these meetings on WebEx and things like that all the time before me. She's working with people in the States and Israel and Australia and different time zones because that's her job as in drug development. They're all around the world. There's clinical trials going on everywhere. For me, as a chazan, what did I know from Zoom Shmoom? I never heard about it. I didn't even know it existed. All of a sudden, I get told, "You're going to do Zoom." And I said, "What the heck is a Zoom? I never heard of it." "You're going to sit at home, Marshall, and you're going to sing in daven, and we're going to, how am I going to do that?" Well, you download the program. Obviously, it isn't such a big genius chacham because everybody, all of you are here today. Yesterday, there was 90 computers on for the program Michael and I did for the singing. And I'm looking at them going 80, 90 computers. There could be 120 people with couples watching a program together. And nobody had to leave their house. That was the positive thing. You sat there, you watched, you were in my own home. We didn't even have to go anywhere. It was actually, I enjoyed it. What I missed was the electricity because I couldn't see anybody. See, Laura was working the computer. She saw the people on the computer. I'm using, it's a whole setup here. I have a microphone that I'm talking into right now separately. I'm not even using my laptop camera right this minute. I'm using a external camera because it widens, it shows the whole room. I'm getting fancy now. You know what I mean? I'm getting fancy. The camera cost me $35. I bought it on Amazon. I bought a microphone for $35 because it sounded better than the computer. You know, like you can. Everybody's a genius technologist today. So what happens is, I look at our Friday service at 4:30 p.m. and there's 50, 60 people on Zoom together, and we're singing and we're davening, and you didn't have to get in your car, and you didn't have to schlep to shul, and you didn't have to leave your place, and then your supper's ready on time because you know what I mean. You know, I think it's fantastic. We had trouble before to have a minyan for 10, 12 people on a February, it's March the 2nd. So in March, to get people to want to schlep out to come to shul on a Friday, when they have to work sometimes, they're on their way home, they go, "You know what, maybe next week." Next week comes maybe the following week. Now, you could be in your office, you could be on your telephone, your cell phone, your iPad, your computer, your face. You could be in 3 places at the same time. You could be in your kitchen boiling the potatoes and watching the service. So it's not really such a bad thing. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people in the top row, including me. So 5, 10, 15, 22 people here right now, right? Now, if I was giving this right now at Bet David, this class for the hour, you had to schlep all the way to the shul for 1 hour and then schlep all the way home, there would be half of you here. There wouldn't even be half, there'd be less. So this is the wonderful thing. But what is allowed in technology? We trip that motion sensor non-intentionally, that's allowed because you don't care about it. And that's where the laws are starting to change. Judy Silver asked the question, you can all see it. Is saying Kaddish on Zoom or live stream an issue? 100%. Is it kosher? I'll tell you straight out, absolutely not. Absolutely not. And you'll say, so why are we doing it? I'm going to tell you why. And I'll tell you why it's not allowed. Because the rabbis haven't allowed it yet. If you wait long enough, like lights being allowed to put on a timer, it'll be allowed. We're just not there yet. It's very interesting. You have a situation where the rabbis have said, can you phone somebody in a hospital if they're sick instead of visiting them? As soon as this class is over, I'm driving to someone's house. I'm going to someone's house to have an outdoor visit with them. They're sick and they want to, and I'm going to go make a visit. Now, why do I have to visit them? It's cold out there. I got to put a hat and gloves and coat and sit outside in his porch for 10, 15 minutes and then come home. Why don't I just Zoom him and I can see him and he can be warm in his house and I can be warm in my house? Because the rabbis say it's much better if you can visit in person. You cannot experience a person's suffering or anguish or position that they're in unless you're physically with them in their presence. And I know people on this Zoom right now that have recently visited other people that I can't even begin to tell you how much it meant that they did that. So that's why I'm doing it. But the rabbis say, if you can't get there, I'm sick, I've got a bad cold, I can't go and visit a person with a bad cold, I'm going to give them a bad cold to make them worse. Then you're allowed to make a phone call, or you're allowed to, in today's technology, do a FaceTime or a Zoom to visit them, and it counts, they said, as a mitzvah. The modern poskim said it counts. They said the other thing that counts is Havdalah, because someone's in a hospital, you can't go make Havdalah and light a candle in the hospital. So you say, Mom, I'm making Havdalah now. I want you to listen on the phone call and you can hear it. And you do it and they hear it. That's better than not being present. The other thing that the rabbi said was allowed was Megillat Esther. Megillat Esther is, first of all, it's not biblical. There is no Megillat Esther. There is no, it's a Megillah came after, it's post-biblical, right? So that's what's allowed. Bikur Cholim. So why did we make a decision for Beth David that we're going to have a minyan, count it, say Kaddish, because Rabbi Shaim was not in favor of saying Kaddish at the beginning. He wanted to go along with the RA position, which was that you do an alternate prayer. And I'm part of that. I'm instrumental in changing that. Rabbi Shaim, I spoke with him and he said, I don't necessarily agree with it, but if you think, he trusted me on this, that it's that important, and you can speak with him. He decided it on his own as well, by the way. He doesn't do things because I want him to do it. He does things because he's a wonderful rabbi who cares about his community and cares about our shul. And he made a decision that we are going to say Kaddish. Because he knew that our community was craving it, they wanted it. And how do we know that now? Because look at all of the people from other shuls that are coming to us because they can't. I have a friend of mine that went to shul, I'm not going to tell you which shul, and they didn't have a minyan. He had his father's yahrzeit. He had no minyan, he didn't say Kaddish, he went home disappointed. He came over, he phoned me up, he said, are you still doing the Zoom? I said, yeah, can you send me a link? I sent him the link, he came on. Not only he came on, but he led, I don't remember if it was mincha then already, he led mincha. And his mother, who he can't be with because she's in Montreal, came on the Zoom and said Kaddish with him from Montreal. That's incredible to me. And I think that that's more important in some ways than being, as some people refer to it here, as what's kosher. And is it right? Would they do it in the holy neighborhood? Absolutely not. And I don't think every shul should do it because we wouldn't be unique. If everybody was doing it, who needs to come to us? What makes us unique and makes us different and makes us successful is that we have been leaders in the city, in the community, with this spirit of the Zoom and making it so people have an opportunity to do something they wouldn't do. And I'm not talking about the pandemic. Forget about the pandemic now. As far as I'm concerned, we can be in shul, put a mask on and come back to shul. What I'm talking about is the people that can't come. There's many people that they can't come to shul. Either they're not well, or maybe they're in a position where they can't drive there, or it's winter, or it's icy. Do you think I want you to get into a car accident coming to shul in a winter storm to come and say Kaddish for your side when you can do it from Zoom on home and be safe? I think it's better. But Marshall Loomer's opinion doesn't hold water because I'm not a heavyweight when it comes to, I mean, I eat a lot, but I'm not compared to the rabbis who give a real opinion. We have to listen to what they say. So when you ask me the question, I have to give you the honest answer and say, would they smile upon us for doing it? Probably not. Would they say, well, if your community accepts it, then maybe that should be okay. And our community, for the most part, accepts it. And there are exceptions. And some of you that are here even right now, I know don't like it. They don't enjoy the experience and don't find it meaningful. And I've been finding it more meaningful as we've gone along. I really like it. I can speak for a few people that I'm looking at here that I know that love it. And I can, and they were people that, by the way, that came every single day. And I know other people that came every single morning to shul. And it's not their thing. And I respect that. And I think that we have to look at it and say, is it a violation or is it meaningful to the community? Because there are other alternatives, right? But I think that it's important. I'm going to stop talking because it's 12:30. But what I want to talk about, and I'm going to ask, well, I'm not going to ask, I'm going to tell them, Faye and Cora will arrange it. We're going to continue this next week. I want to continue because I want to talk about the issues leading up to two things, which is finish off about the whole thing about the intentionally setting off all of these security cameras and all of this, and what is allowed according to video cameras to Rav Moshe Feinstein, because what he said is quite liberal and quite strict at the same time. He really gives both opinions. So I think Rav Moshe Feinstein is really someone who we follow, and surprisingly, he's a little bit lenient here. And I never thought he would be. And when I learned that, I just said, wow, this is really, really quite something. And I also want to talk about someone who argued with him all the time, no surprise, which was Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach on that opinion. And he is going to also give us a different opinion that would tie in with the Gemara and the sources as to why we should or should not allow it. And is it a Torah violation or not? And then the last thing we're going to touch on next week is something that's going to appeal to everyone. And I'll share the tshuva with you if you want. And that is Zooming for a Seder on Pesach. I think it's very important. And we're going to talk about that. But I want you to be able to know that hearing the Megillat Esther through Zoom or live stream is completely permissible and completely allowed if there's no other choice. All right. So I'll end it there and thank all of you for coming and spending time with me.
Thank you, Marshall.
Thank you. Thank you very much, as always.
Marshall, the concert last night was just wonderful. It was marvelous.
Yes.
Well, we had just as much fun, Lynn. We were really loving it. Michael and I just love it. And David and George are wonderful musicians. You know, they're just terrific. So.
That's great.
Thank you.
Marshall, I have a question for you.
Sure.
When you were thinking of going to Esther's place and waving your hand, be careful because there's a siren there. And I'm telling you,
There's
it'll
a what?
blast you right out of the universe.
Okay. A siren. A siren.
Thank you, Marshall.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks
Have a
so
good
much.
day,
I
everybody.
didn't even know I had motion sensors.
Yeah, well, I installed them, you know.
Ah, that's it.
That's what
Not
you
with the
learn by
cam-
come. That's
With
what
the
you learn by
camera when
coming
you
to
installed
shul.
that.
All right, I'm gonna go run. I'm gonna go do a mitzvah visit now. All right, everybody.
Good thing. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye bye.